Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I'm John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today. Let's do it. Truck stop workers and rest area employees of Reddit. What's the strangest thing you've seen out there? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe.
I have some stories for you. I used to work at a gas station straight out of the X-Files. You know, long empty highway curving through the woods of the Pacific Northwest. Then there's a single lonely gas station that you would drive past at 60 miles per hour while thinking, yeesh, who would stop and go into that dump? Then there's like 50 miles of road until a town where racist redneck lumberjacks have a perpetual, poorly disguised hatred for the native and Hispanic populations. The town had the highest per capita number of men with wandering eyes. I don't mean like they looked lustily at other women, but there were a lot of dudes in blue jean overalls whose eyes literally would point two different directions. My theory was that they were always trying to keep an eye out for Bigfoot. I think that most of our customers were people who drove past the shady-looking station and then realized there's no gas for quite a while. So they would turn around and reluctantly come back to fill their tanks. They go inside. The only other customer is a trucker whose pants are so low that they can see that he's wearing an adult diaper. He's gazing at the nudie magazines. The weird gas station attendant looks like he could feasibly be an alien wearing human skin. That guy was me, Kevin. The owner of this creepy gas station believed in Bigfoot down to his very soul. He sold all sorts of Bigfoot garbage and really pushed for people to buy those old 35mm disposable cameras just in case they see old Bigfoot. My boss saw Bigfoot several times, he's claimed. I sometimes wonder if he hired me only because from a certain angle I could be mistaken for Bigfoot, or at least Bigfoot wearing human skin. In the corner of the gas station, Kevin set up a tiny Bigfoot museum where hair that was obviously from Kevin's own dog was being presented as real, verified Bigfoot hair. The way technically this was true because his dog's name was Bigfoot, among many other names. Country dogs, as compared to city dogs, tend to have many names. Bigfoot, the dog, was a wanderer, as was probably Bigfoot, the non-dog. In the museum, there were castings of shallow Bigfoot footprints. Every few days, I liked to remind my boss that Bigfoot would have to weigh like 90 pounds for those footprints to be so shallow. Kevin did not like that. He didn't like science. Bigfoot for him was a matter of faith. A few days would pass. I would leave at the end of my shift and hand Kevin a detailed picture I drew of my revised Bigfoot theory, where Bigfoot was being lightened by a huge bunch of helium balloons, thus explaining the shallow footprints. There was an arrow pointing to the helium balloons with a label that said Bigfoot Natural Helium Balloons. I drew Kevin as a stick figure peering out from behind a tree at Bigfoot and said, "That's obviously you." The next day I asked if any Bigfoot searchers had ever thought to look up because Bigfoot might be floating through the trees with the help of Bigfoot's big balloons. Kevin hated it when I talked about Bigfoot. Life was great. I have made up a lot of bullshit about Bigfoot, among other things, just to annoy Kevin. There were the days before cell phone cameras and the ubiquity of technology. That was the golden era of Bigfoot hunting and stupid stories of the strange things that happened to men when they walked through the woods. I think the story of Bigfoot exists because nature is powerful in prompting the emotions of manly men who despise themselves when they are emotional. A man walks into the forest and he feels something. It's hard to put into words what all these trees and wildlife do to your mind and your heart and your soul. A person who has never been in the woods can walk into them and suddenly realize an epiphany. I'm an outdoorsman, he thinks. Holy shit. I'm not Jeff from accounting. I'm actually an outdoorsman. What am I doing with my life? Oh God, oh God. So, once upon a time, a man felt changed by the woods during his walk through them, and he decided subconsciously, consciously, or psiously to manifest the feeling into the form of a being. The legend of Bigfoot was formed. He didn't see a giant furry creature bounding through the woods. He saw a reflection of himself. He saw a viable explanation for the emotion in his chest, the hallucinated Bigfoot, into existence, in order to face him. Anyway, when you tend a shitty gas station in the middle of nowhere, you get philosophical. Also, you get robbed, kind of a lot. That's also why Kevin tended to hire people who looked like Bigfoot or like aliens wearing human skin. Theoretically, they get robbed less. This is basic gas station science here. Ugly, less problems. One time, I came out of the bathroom to what I thought was an empty 2 a.m. store. Stood by the register sleepily. Then I just let go of the biggest post-urination fart of my life. You all have dads, right? You've heard strange noises in the bathrooms before. And suddenly, there was a nice woman who looked up from the chip section. Apparently, I didn't hear the doorbell, which played not a doorbell sound, but a cow's moo whenever someone walked in at 2 a.m. I wasn't even embarrassed about the fart. I knew that one day, far into the future, I would write about this story and get upvotes just as soon as someone would invent the internet. If your broken spirit ended finances and physically, you could at least be rich in terms of having a wealth of stupid, long stories. Anyway, sometimes I just like to stand as still as possible in the Bigfoot gas station and stare off into the distance so that anyone entering the gas station could be impressed by my ability to blend into the ample selection of cigarettes behind me. I bet that some of the wandering-eyed locals were jealous of my natural ability to stare at one single locus at the horizon, rather than two places. My ability to stare is without competition. Why stare at all? Why creep out gas station customers? Well, my explanation is as follows. When the entire world sees you as weird looking, it's actually not a curse, it's a blessing. It's freeing. If, no matter how you act, you will be perceived as weird, then you are free. If the consequences are certain no matter your actions, then you're free to do whatever you want. Julius Caesar said something like that, probably just before inventing the orange Julius and a salad. So, I leaned into being creepy. I worked at a creepy gas station. After all, it was themed after Bigfoot. I looked like the love child of Bigfoot and a Jell-O pudding pop. Creepy Bigfoot gas station guy was a role I was born to play. I'm not an employee, but I had an odd encounter with someone who claimed to be one. When I was 19 years old, female, I was driving home to California via I-80 through Wyoming. It was getting late, and I was beyond tired. I pulled over to the side of the interstate, and I set my alarm for 15 minutes, so I could take a nap and then continue on to the next town. It's important to note that I normally wear contacts, but I had been wearing my glasses and I took them off to sleep. I can't read a sign 2 feet in front of myself without them. I fall asleep. I'm awoken by a tap on the window. I started feeling around for my glasses, but I knocked them to the floor of the car. A second knock. I thought it might be the police, even though I didn't see lights. I didn't know if it was legal to park on the side of the highway. I rolled down my window a couple of inches, but I couldn't see anything about this person without my glasses. They asked if everything was alright, and I said yes. I still thought this might be law enforcement, so I was being hella respectful. But then he told me that he recognized me. I said, no you don't. He said he worked up the road at a rest stop gas station, and he had just seen me fill up my tank. I hadn't filled up in the entire state of Wyoming. I drove a yellow VW Beetle with some pretty significant damage to the rear bumper. He insisted he recognized my car. At this point, I knew he wasn't law enforcement, and I knew he was lying. So I started making my replies short. Then he asked if I wanted a ride. I said no. He offered to drive me to the nearest hotel. I said no. He was very insistent. Finally, I asked if I was doing anything wrong or illegal. He said no and left. Could have been a totally normal dude, but it freaks me out to think about it now. A few years later, the scariest thing about it to me is how I wouldn't have been able to go to police with a description if something had happened because of my lack of 2020. Be careful out there, everyone. Worked at a gas station while I was in college. My manager was just a few years older than me and kind of a flirt. We were just casually chatting one day, and he comes across a pile of fecal matter in front of the soda fountain. He asks me why I left someone bring their pet into the store. This was before service dogs were common. I said that I didn't see any pets. He volunteered to pick it up, so I thought I would help by retrieving paper towels from the ladies' room. Returning with the paper towels, my nose matches the smell of the ladies' room, with the pile on the floor as I eerily utter, "That ain't dog poop." Best I can tell, an older lady, still in the bathroom stall, pooped her pants, and it just sorta rolled out as she crossed the store. Ugh. I didn't work there, but was there when it happened. At the time, the employee said, "That's the weirdest shit ever," so I'm here to tell it. A little over 10 years ago, my band was on tour somewhere in Texas or Oklahoma. We were riding along the border, so I don't remember exactly what side of the truck stop was on. It was about 3 in the morning in the dead of winter, and I stopped for food while the other guys slept. I was talking to the clerk, waiting for my chimichanga, and this dude walked in, went straight for the bathroom/shower area. About 10 minutes later, dude walks back out, butt-ass naked, with what we can only assume was shit covering his entire front side. Like face to ankles, full-blown shit mask. Dude walks outside, jumps on the hood of a white car, and walks back in to buy a single Slim Jim stick. The cashier vehemently tells the dude to just take it and go. The guy takes said Slim Jim outside, sticks it up his ass, and full sprints out of sight. I paid for the chimney, even though I wasn't going to eat it, and my energy drink, and went back to the van, just being befuddled over the whole thing, when the singer, who's in the passenger seat, asks if I saw some naked dude running away. I guess he stopped by the van and asked to borrow some weirdly specific amount of change and ran off before he could answer.
Alright, this isn't about the story we just heard, but in fact it's about the story coming up. Some of you longtime listeners may recognize this story. I have read it once before, and normally I would do my best to skip stories that we have had on the show before, but this is one of my favorites, so if you haven't heard it, enjoy. If you have heard it, give yourself the next few minutes to enjoy.
As a man that has reached the ripe old age of 48, I can promise you I've seen some shit go down. This one totally takes the cake for me, though. I was waiting out front of a truck stop back in the mid-80s, sitting on a park bench with a guy that had a big Rottweiler kind of dog on a leash with him. I tried to make small talk, but he was quite a sourpuss. So we sat in silence for a few minutes until the most unexpected thing I've ever seen happened right before my very eyes. While we were sitting there, a big 18-wheeler pulls in without a trailer, bobtail. So he parks right up front like a normal car would. Inside the cab of the truck was the driver as a little monkey. The dance for the organ grinder kind. I think they're called rhesus monkeys, perhaps. Well, the dog spots this little monkey, and proceeds to go apeshit over it, lunging at the end of his leash and barking at the top of his lungs, generally making a real spectacle of himself, to say the least. The driver is really upset, but not nearly as much as the monkey is. Actually, upset may be the wrong adjective to use for the monkey, though. In retrospect, I think eagerly aggressive may be a more appropriate description for his disposition. He was pacing the dashboard back and forth, never taking his eyes off of the very aggravating dog. The driver opens his little triangle window that they don't make on cars anymore, the ones made for smokers back in the day. He yells out to this douchebag to call his dog off because it's upsetting his monkey. The guy laughs and says, "No way. I told you he was a jerk, didn't I?" Says that his dog ain't bothering nobody. The dog hasn't shut up since he laid eyes on the monkey. I promise you, he is bothering everybody for several blocks around. Now here's where things start to get interesting. The driver says that if he doesn't call his dog off, he's going to let his monkey loose on the dog. Douchebag laughs and says that his dog would eat that monkey alive. Upon hearing this, the driver leans over and reaches into his glove box, I guess, pulls out one of those tiny baseball bats, like you used to get at Astro World or carnivals, and places it in the monkey's hand. The monkey obviously knows what's about to go down, because he's now trying to squeeze out of that little triangular window I mentioned earlier. This monkey has murder in his eyes, if I've ever seen it. Driver hollers, "Last chance to save your dog's ass, man." In response, douchebag lets his dog off of the leash. Now we have a situation that has escalated to the point where we have a dog jumping up at a window and a monkey screaming profanities right back at him. Well, the driver finally rolls down the regular window, and out leaps all kinds of miniature primate hell. The dog never knew what hit him. Quick as a flash, this monkey is riding on the back of the dog's neck, his two back feet all wrapped up in his neck fur, with one hand hanging onto the ear. The other hand, as you may have guessed by now, is steadily and mercilessly raining down blows about this dog's head and face. I mean, hard blows. You can hear them, whap, whap, whap. Well, it only took a moment for the dog to realize he was in way over his head. He bolts, yelping bloody murder, as he runs away at full speed. I mean, this dog is running so fucking hard, he's throwing up tufts of grass and dirt as soon as he leaves pavement. The monkey is still riding him and beating on him the whole time. Douchebag acts like he wants to fight now, but several people, including myself, stepped up to stop that nonsense. In a couple of minutes or so, the little monkey comes loping back with his little bat still in hand, and leaps up into the still open window of the truck to await his master, who's gone on into the store. That wanker ran off to try to go find his dog, but I don't know if he ever did. My ride showed up and I had to go. Never again in this lifetime will I see something so totally crazy and unexpected like that. I am both fortunate and humble to have seen and been so privileged to be present for such an event. I worked at a mini Dairy Queen in the truck stop as we all got robbed at gunpoint. I feel like the story is pretty self-explanatory. There were no customers in at the time. This guy walks in with some pistol, I couldn't tell the name of it, waving it around like a foam finger. Tells me to empty the register of all the paper money. I stood there blankly, completely unsure of what to do. I politely inform him there's no way for me to open the register without a supervisor code, and I just made minimum wage. He calls me a fucking dumbass and tells me to ring up a Blizzard or something and hit cash. I said, "Oh, okay." He collected his payment from the mini Wendy's and the convenience portion and just fucked off. The cops took notes, but as far as I know, there was no follow-up. It was only like $350. The gas station part probably had more to offer. Anyway, I quit like a month after that. Not my story, but that of a friend who worked at one for decades. Like other people here, He's talked about lot lizards, drug deals, general madness in the parking lot, but once there was a guy who was all of 5'8" and weighed like 100 pounds, always wearing neon half skirts and biking shorts. Gay as the day is long. He had a habit of creating drama, and the cops were calling him multiple times. One day, my friend walks outside to see this guy licking the door handles of every car in the lot, straight up just tonguing them. Someone catches him at it and is chasing him around the lot, screaming he's going to knock his lights out. My friend calls the cops, who are in no rush to deal with this, but in the interim, the liquor and the angry man have disappeared. 20 minutes or so later, the cop shows up. It's often one of 3 cops who knocks on the door with his nightstick and says, "Take me to your homos." The friend explains the situation and the cop raises his hand. "I know who it is, I'll find him." In under 2 minutes, he's in the bathroom, banging on the stall doors, screaming in a very stereotyped Irish accent, "Jimmy, it's your old friend Officer McDougal. Yeah, come on out now." Jimmy explodes from out of the last stall, pants around his ankles, screaming in a high-pitched voice. The angry guy from before crab walks out behind him, confused at what's going on. The officer, Pepe Le Pew's his way out after Jimmy, taking his time. When Jimmy gets to the chain-linked fence, he refuses to let go and starts making these insane wailing noises, crying about he won't spend another night in jail. Angry guy is now standing outside, pants still around his ankles, holding his pud. The cop is trying everything in his power to peel this screaming man in a halter top off a fence. A crowd is gathering. The cop looks up at my friend and says with an enormous grin, "God, I love my job." When I was in college, one of my relatives hooked me up with a job over Christmas break as the overnight custodian at a rest stop on the Interstate. It was easy money. I would sit in the office from midnight to 8 a.m. and read books and play Game Boy. I only had to come out, it's locked, to check the cleanliness of the place once an hour. Anyway, the store of gay roadside hookups is so true. This was in the mid-90s, way before the internet. I had a peephole in my office that looked out into the lobby. All night, dudes just hanging out, waiting for other dudes. I assume they went back to their cars after meeting, because no funny business actually happened in the lobby or restroom that I'm aware of. Anyway, long story short, I would spend hours looking out my peephole watching gay dudes cruise for other gay dudes. Fun times. There was one instance where I was working one night and this family of 4 or 5 came in. Adult kids with aging parents. They milled about the store, used the bathroom and whatnot, and were getting ready to leave when the mom came up to the counter. Ghost Riders by Johnny Cash had been playing on the loudspeaker for a few minutes. She looks at me in the face and says, "I was just in the bathroom, and you know the part in the song where he goes, 'Ghost Riders in the sky,' was in the bathroom stall, and during that part, I could swear I heard something move in the stall next to me. But I was in there alone. I think it was the ghost of Johnny Cash. All I could think was, this lady has seen Walk the Line too many times or something. I was honestly just dumbfounded." I worked at a pizza restaurant attached to a gas station right off the interstate. On Sunday morning, it was always really slow, so those of us working would make ourselves a breakfast pizza and hang out. One of the girls was facing the gas station side. She suddenly stopped talking, her eyes went wide, and she shot up and ran into the kitchen. The other 2 employees who were on either side of her turned to look and similarly rushed off. I was facing away, so it took me a few extra seconds to look. There was a large, burly man in a red sequin dress with a clutch handbag and heels. He started walking toward the restaurant. Since the rest of the staff were in the back, laughing loudly enough to hear out front, I calmly took his order. He ordered a meat lover's pizza, and my coworker sounded like they were going to die of laughter. I somehow managed to act normal about the whole thing. let him know it would be a few minutes, popped his pizza into the oven, and then went back to inform my coworkers that they were not as sneaky as they thought they were. The fact that the guy was in a full fancy ensemble wasn't as strange as him acting like any other bro trucker. He wasn't trying to look or act feminine. He was just a dude in a red sequin dress and heels. There was also a situation I wasn't there for, but I saw the video. A guy who was fired for stealing came back and started trying to pick a fight with another employee. The manager, this tiny little 5'3" tall lady, came running out, brandishing a weapon, pizza paddle, and screaming. The guy stumbled back, fell over a table, and then ran out the door. The manager thought it was hilarious and gleefully shared it with everyone under this guise of telling us to call the police if he showed up again. Very shortly after I started working at a travel center before electronic logs, when it was much easier to cheat and drive more hours than allowed, I had a truck driver come in and ask me to call the local animal control officer. He explained he had picked up a large, severely injured, bleeding and unconscious cat about 450 miles back, hoping it would live until he got to a lady friend's house. She worked for a vet and fostered and rehabbed many animals, and he thought if anyone could save it, it was her. He explained he had wrapped it in a towel and put it on the floor of his bunk area, so if it came to, it would not roll off his bunk and further injure itself. He'd stopped a couple of times to make sure it was still breathing, and it seemed to be holding on. About 100 from our location, he said it came around and started making noise. First soft meows, then became yowls and turned into loud screeching and hissing. The cat, still wrapped in the towel, was now as far under the bunk as possible, much bigger than he first thought, and hissing and swiping at him with huge claws every time he so much as approached the bunk. He didn't want to hurt it, but he wanted that demon cat out of his truck before it bled, shit, and pissed all over, ruined the cab and bunk of the truck. I called out local PD, and as animal control did not work around the clock, they sent an officer out. The driver told his story and handed his keys over to the officer, saying he wasn't going anywhere near the truck until the cat was gone. The officer agreed to check out the situation, and the driver stood outside and watched him. After a few minutes, he came back in saying even the cop needed backup for that devil cat because other cops and the fire department were there. I thought that was strange because I didn't see any other emergency vehicles or lights. A bit after that, the original officer came in and asked the driver to follow him. The driver followed him out, ribbing him about all the backup he needed for a cat. About 40 minutes after that, the officer came back in and told me the driver would be staying there at least 12 hours, and if the truck moved even an inch before then, to call the police department immediately. I said okay, and asked about the cat. The cop told me there was no cat. It didn't get out and run away. There had never been a cat. There was a beat-up, dirty, red and black striped towel wrapped in another towel on the floor, and that was it. The driver had not slept in several days because he got bonuses for getting hot loads in early, and he had been without enough sleep for so long that he'd started hallucinating. The bleeding black cat was actually the red and black striped towel. The blood, the breathing, all the cat noises, the slashing claws, and even the other cop cars and fire trucks were all hallucinations. The cop had written him a rather large ticket for violations and pulled the driver off the road to sleep. Then he spent half an hour convincing the driver that he imagined it all. He had to pick up and shake out the towel and have the driver touch it again. He even had the driver tell him where the fire truck was and then walked through it to prove it wasn't real before he believed him. To know someone driving 80,000 pounds of machine and load down the road had no grasp of reality for at least 450 miles scared and still scares the living hell out of me.